Wendy. Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? So I saw a question come in, and Wendy, I still wasn't able to answer the Q&A screen. Someone wrote in, good morning, will the presentation be made available? Actually, what we have is a handout here. You can see it on this page. If you go to that URL, you can download it. And just so everybody knows, I am going to monitor the chat boxes and the Q&A boxes, and that way I can address questions as they come in and respond to your comments, because this is going to be a very interactive webinar. It's not just me talking. So please go out and download that handout, and you can follow along. It doesn't include all the slides. It summarizes everything in a nice short manner. But with regard to organizational change, what we're going to discuss here is the big picture of managing the people side of changes. These are the changes that an organization have or that groups of people will go through. Of course, there are changes that affect individuals as well. And I talked about that about 4 or 5 months ago for ITMPI. You can download that recording. It's called Surviving the Chaos of Change. And that addressed very specifically individual reactions to change and levels of resistance and how you can overcome that. When we're dealing with larger projects and the larger scale changes, then we need to look at organizational change. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So the two go hand in hand really nicely. With this presentation, I used the 80-20 rule. Hopefully, you all use that a lot. But I wanted to focus on the 20% of those items that I thought would give you the biggest impact on your organizational change efforts. And so, I'm going to present to you a number of things to consider. Take what you like, take whatever will work on your projects and modify it for your use. And so now we will move on. Okay, good. I can move the slides. So before we begin, I'd like you all to chat in. And if you would, as we have our dialogue, put that in the chat box. If you have a question, if you could put that in the Q&A box, it'll just help me keep track, because I expect to see a lot of chats come in, and I don't want to lose your question if you have an actual question. But you all tell me, what kinds of organizational changes have you been a part of? You may not have been the project manager. Some people would, if you were a participant, some people might say you were almost the victim, quote, quote, of a change. But what kinds of organizational changes have you been a part of? I'd like to hear so we can incorporate that. Yeah, mergers and acquisitions, that's a good one. Thanks, Clifford. So with M&A, that's definitely very disruptive and to more than one organization. So that's a big thing. Okay, restructuring to cross-functional service teams, good. IT upgrades, yes, that is a good example of an organizational change. New leadership within your C-level or the entire C-suite, wow, that's a big change. So there's going to, you have some getting used to there, changes to get used to there. But, yeah, we could be talking about reorgs, process changes, software changes, platform changes, new regulations or offices that are moving, whether it's your office or the whole company. Those are all organizational changes. Business and cultural change, yeah, good. And we have that constantly in today's environment where we have to adapt. Technology is changing quickly. Even culture in business is changing quickly, and we're having to keep up. So let me ask you, in that, what was done well? Throughout those changes that you all just mentioned and examples that I gave, what was done well? What have you observed that you said, hey, that works, and when I'm in charge of something like this in the future, I'm going to do that? If you would, please let me know. And again, we're going to incorporate that throughout this presentation and this discussion. Okay, communication done well. Now, Susan, that's great, because communication is key to so much, and I find more often than not there are good intentions, but it's not actually done well. So good. And Michelle, you also said lots of communication from the CEO down. That's perfect. So that was an implementation that was well thought out, and not only thought out, but actually implemented, actually done, and that's what's unusual. The technical aspects. Okay, yes. So Clifford, most oftentimes when we're dealing with changes, the technical aspects are addressed sooner than or more thoroughly then say the overall organizational change, and if yours were handled well, then that's good. Internal policy changes were handled well, excellent. Constant communication and clear communication from leadership to reinforce the impact of the change. That's good, that's key. All hands meetings worked well. And going back to internal policy changes, yes, if that's handled well, good. Reassure job security, which is the major concern, good. So those were all things that were done well. In your experience, what wasn't done so well for you? And I realize that some of you may have said communication was really done well and you were impressed with that, and others of you will say, well, in my case, communication wasn't done so well. So there we go. Yeah, communications, it's not often done as well as it should or could be, as it needs to be. Anybody else? What wasn't done well? What really, and these stick in our memory, right? Because they were painful. So we tend to remember these things. Formal introductions for new changes. Yeah, so everyone didn't understand them well. Senior PMO team members didn't care about finance. Okay. Yeah, departments not talking or working well together. Job pay grade leveling. Yeah, getting inputs from all levels of the organization. That's an error. Communication was done, but it happened after the fact. Yeah, there's always the slew after it's done. Technical systems transition, not performed on time with consistency throughout the acquired organization. Okay. Yeah, integrating those technical systems between, sounds like 2 organizations. This is going back to the M&A. Lack of transparency in formal communication processes, more PMO processes, not managing that overall change well. Okay, so one thing I did notice is that more of you spoke up, or you spoke up with more items on what wasn't done well than what was. And again, because that's what causes that painful memory, and that tends to stick with us. And, it's easy to find the things that don't go well. So let's make sure that those don't happen again, right? Okay, good, yeah, or integration of new company into acquiring company, good. So let's define what an organizational change is. And again, I do have these the handout. There we go. We do have the handout here. If you want to follow along on the handout, much of what we're going to say is on it, not everything, but it's summarized on that handout. Okay, good. So with defining organizational change, what we are recognizing here is the human side of change. It's the people aspect of our change in total. It's change management that addresses individuals, because as I said before, often the actual changes, such as the technologies that are being changed or the systems or the processes, those tend to be addressed more thoroughly and earlier in the process than the changes to the people. And it's ensuring that the people transitions are correct and complete is just as important or more so than those technical transitions. So with an organizational change, what we're looking at here is, the aspect of that change on people, on processes, and culture. And it's a change that requires that not only staff develop new behaviors or skills, because in some ways all projects, by nature of being a project, you are implementing changes, you're introducing a change. But with an organizational change, it's a higher level and more widespread impact of a change, so that the organization as a whole has to change. So the steps to making to effective organizational change is, first we're going to talk about predicting the change impact. What is that impact of change going to be? And not just from the technical or security or IT aspect, but from the people, the processes, and the culture. We're going to explore that. And then we're going to take a look at stakeholder analysis, and we're going to talk about it from possibly a different perspective than what you've thought about before. And so we're going to determine, who is impacted and how, but from a different aspect than the general stakeholder analysis we tend to do, or at least tend to talk about within project management. Then determine leadership and support. We're going to talk about that, how you can assess that and use that to help you with your plans. And then step 4 is crafting that key message. Now that we know who our stakeholders are, what the possible impacts are, and their concerns, then how are we going to address those? What are those messages that we need to develop and to address those concerns and to address all the complaints or